This evening we've got something very special for you. I'm really excited to be talking about one of my favourite models from one of my favourite brands. It's not round, it's not square, it's a quiet icon that's endured decades of production. Of course, I'm talking about the Golden Ellipse from Patek Philippe. Let's jump into it. Over the last few weeks, we've been able to accumulate a number of really interesting examples of the Ellipse, and it's given us this unique opportunity to run through the chronology of the model, talking about what it was like back in its inception in the 1960s, the late 60s, then thinking about how it was enjoyed through the decades all the way up to modern times. This is a model that has been in production for 40 plus years, and it's such a special thing. I really want to talk about how it's aged and how the collector community has really grown to love it. It's an exciting video, but let's start in the 60s. So let's start with the very first Ellipse, the 3548. I want to paint a picture of what it was like back in Switzerland in 1968 when this model was first introduced. It's an interesting time, frankly, because in a post-war world, watches were booming. People were looking to spend money and celebrate life in a way that they weren't for a long time before then. It enabled brands like Rolex to come out with absolute icons that still endure today. But if you look at Patek Philippe, they had a catalogue that was full of Calatravas, nothing that was particularly quintessential to the brand. Where other companies were turning to people like Gerald Genta for designs, Patek Philippe interestingly discovered this design and the concept of the Ellipse in-house. To really understand this model, we need to talk about the concept of the watch itself. It's called the Golden Ellipse for a reason. It's based around the golden ratio, which is a ratio that's found in nature pretty much everywhere you look. The golden ratio is the ratio between the sum of the two sides of the watch and the longer side of the watch. That gives you a ratio of 1 to 1.618. It's a ratio that we see replicated everywhere in life. It's in nature, it's in flora, in fauna. And interestingly, it's a ratio that resonates deeply with us as human beings. Without getting too into it, when you put this watch on your wrist, the proportions just feel right. And I think it's exactly that reason why the golden ratio is used and was chosen by Patek Philippe, and why it's become such a success. I look at other watches in the world of collecting, such as Lange and their Lange 1, which also uses Phi, the golden ratio, between the subdials. That's an asymmetric watch, but when you wear it, it feels like it works, it feels right. The Golden Ellipse is not just called the Golden Ellipse because of the golden ratio. Of course, they've chosen to use gold for pretty much everything about it. The case is gold, the hands are gold, the indices are gold. And really interestingly, the dial is solid 18 karat gold. So how do they make it blue? Well, they used a company called Singer to create all of the dials. They created and manufactured this process where they combined cobalt atoms and ionized the gold itself. And through a treatment that I'm unable to describe, they were able to turn that solid gold dial into something that's electric blue. They were able to create something that even today stands out as one of the best sunburst dials that you ever come across. This is something that screams quality. It's the perfect blue to contrast against the yellow gold case. It feels expensive, it feels perfect. I really think the key to the success of this model is that every last component of it has that core concept of perfection. It's the perfect color, the perfect material, the perfect design, the perfect shape. Even the lugs are designed to be floating behind the watch so that they don't interrupt the perfect lines of the case. And lo and behold, in the late 60s, Patek struck gold and found their icon, the Golden Ellipse. Once the success of the 3548 had been established, Patek were able to build on those foundations, and across the 70s, there were more than 70 different Ellipse models that were available in the catalogue. A crazy number when you think about it today. I've got a couple of my all-time favourites here. This is the 3584. It's a white gold model with an integrated bracelet, a woven bracelet that feels like silk. What I love about this is that actually the case is golden elliptical, but the dial itself is more of an egg-shaped. It's a really strange thing. It still conforms to that ratio of the case, but the dial is different. And that makes you look at it and try to work it out. It takes a little while, certainly for my brain, after a whiskey, to get to sort of feel that sort of synergy that comes naturally in just the standard golden ellipse. It's little tweaks like that that I love. This model in particular is one that I've never seen before until this one was sourced, but it has the same blue gold dial. The hands actually are loomed, which I think is fantastic. But really for me, the star of the show is the bracelet. It's a construction that, despite being more than 50 years old, is so fresh, so industrial, I have to say. Brilliant, brilliant watch. It's one of my favourites of all time, and I've only known about it for the last few weeks. So now we're starting to see sudden tweaks to the model that was established back in 1968. The next model is the 3848, exactly the same case dimensions as the 3548, with an integrated bracelet that's made actually in a similar technique to one that is in the current catalogue in 2025. It's a sort of chain link bracelet, but highly polished and very, very silky. This watch feels 1970. It feels like 1970 luxury. It's these subtle tweaks from the original design. I love the fact that you put something like this on. The size, the proportions, the design, the materials used. It takes you right back to the 70s. What a watch. There might be subtle tweaks, but the core of the Ellipse is still there. It's important to say that as we moved up to the 3848, the caliber inside, which on the three watches we've covered off so far is manual wind, this is improved to the caliber 215. The 215 is just a much more robust caliber, and in the 70s, of course, the watch world was shaken by the quartz crisis. All of a sudden, you could find a watch that was inexpensive, but told really accurate time. And that's why the 215 was introduced. These watches with the earlier movements just weren't quite as robust, not quite as precise. But the 215 caliber changed all of that and gave them a real opportunity to challenge quartz with something that was completely handmade. Swiss watchmakers, manufacturers of mechanical watches, really had to up their game, and the way that they approached that was to focus on craftsmanship. Patek Philippe, obviously, as a Holy Trinity watchmaker, were right at the top of that tree. Patek Philippe was a brand that people would gravitate towards, and the Ellipse was the watch for Patek Philippe, and the one that collectors, and frankly anyone that really wanted to show off, would go for. People wanted to be in that Ellipse club. They wanted to have something that expressed how wealthy they were and how good their taste was. And collectors came in their droves and couldn't get enough of this watch. So Patek Philippe increased all of their productions. They looked at different ways of twisting and tweaking that original design so that it would appeal to everyone. Not everyone wanted a small watch, so Patek Philippe looked at larger case sizes, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Not everyone wanted a manual wind watch, so they looked at ways of introducing ultra-thin automatic movements. Not everyone wanted a watch. Patek Philippe didn't want to just appeal to someone that wanted to tell the time. They wanted to be able to sell other luxury goods and objets d'art, such as rings and key rings, lighters, mirrors. It really was a lifestyle that they were selling. And when you look at the adverts in that time, they talked about investment potential. They talked about the non-watch. They talked about the Ellipse being a trust fund, something that you would buy and hand down, and it maintain its value, increase its value in the same way that a bond might. This is what saved Patek Philippe from the quartz crisis. And let's move on to the late 70s. In the mid to late 70s, the watch world was changing rapidly. We saw Gerald Genta designs that led to the introduction of the 5402 Royal Oak, the 3700 Nautilus, the 222 from Vacheron. These were designs that were bold, that were strong, and were designed to try and take collectors away from quartz, the temptation of having something cheap and available, and move them towards bold designs that stood really more for people's character, the way that they wanted to talk about and present themselves. Those watches were designed to be not just sporty, but top-tier luxury. Those watches were heavily design-led, elegant and luxurious and svelte. The way that they were enabled to do that, to have those slim profiles, those elegant profiles, was the JLC caliber 28255, that ultra-thin, full-rotor mechanical movement. It's that caliber, the 28255, that was brought in to create the Grand Ellipse, the reference 3589. I find this watch absolutely fascinating. The 3589 is a much bigger case size. You've still got that golden ellipse ratio in the middle of the dial, but it's surrounded by a bulk, a heavy bulk that gives it that sort of oversized proportion. And somehow they're still able to squeeze a full rotor automatic movement into a watch that's less than 6mm thick. Is absolutely fascinating to me. It really is, because the Golden Ellipse would be ruined if it became this chunky 10mm thick watch. It's all about elegance, this thing, and that ultra thin caliber being used in an elegant dress watch such as the Grand Ellipse is just poetry. I love it, I really do. There's one other characteristic that I want to talk about with this specific model. There are some absolutely fantastic examples of the 3589, the Grand Ellipse, out there, and this one you could be confused by perhaps, or at least led to believe that it is a standard sunburst blue dial. But when you look at this one alongside the other blue dials, there's something about it that makes it almost electric in its reflective properties. It feels almost like the blue that you have in a FP Journe Chronometre Bleu. It's fascinating that this dial, as well as the other blues, are all created by Singer. That was the dial manufacturer for Patek at the time. The people that created this technique of using cobalt to bring out the blue on a solid gold dial. But why is this dial different? Why does this play with light in a way that the other blues don't? I have no idea, but it makes me feel like this watch is so unique. Of course, we've got Roman numerals here, and these are sort of etched into that blue to reveal the yellow gold beneath. There's so much about this watch that makes it interesting, curious, and also quite modern sized, despite the fact that the actual dial is really no bigger than the earlier 3548. The oversized bezel gives it those larger proportions, make it feel more like a modern watch. It really is an interesting and fascinating example. The story of the Ellipse and its evolution is almost paralleled with the story of luxury. It's so interesting how tastes change from the late 60s to the mid to late 70s. And then you're approaching the 80s and you see something like this, the reference 3739, which has gold on gold on gold. The bracelet feels Gordon Gekko. It feels like that Cartier Carré, the reference 2960 that Wall Street traders used to wear and certainly did in the famous film. I love this thing. I look back at the 70s and it appears to me to be this period of fun, of experimentation. This reference 3739 plays on the original design concept, which is a portrait view of the golden ratio, and twists it around 90 degrees to give you this sort of horizontal view, but also a stepped case, and of course this silky, absolutely buttery bracelet. It's an incredible thing, it really is. Satinated gold. It's in your face, but it's not as in your face as if it was fully polished. So I like that it's got a little bit of restraint in there, despite being gold on gold on gold. It's got the use of Dauphine hands instead of stick hands. Again, why? I'm not sure, but I love it. This reference, coming from the late 70s, early 80s, also indicates another line in the sand when it comes to the movement manufacture. In 1977, Patek released the caliber 240Q, and that's a micro rotor caliber that was used actually and is still used in so many watches across their range. It's a very high quality caliber that is still very thin but manages to harness energy from a much smaller rotor than is found in the earlier JLC based calibers. I do think that the JLC caliber, as iconic as it was problematic to maintain. We as Subdial see fairly regularly the JLC caliber ultra thin full rotors, and we are fully aware that that is a fairly complicated watch to regulate and to maintain. But the 240Q improves that robustness. It builds on the quality and the serviceability, but still maintains that ultra thin profile that makes an ellipse an ellipse. And that leads us very nicely into one of my favorite references, the 3738. The reference 3738 takes everything about the original and increases the size ever so slightly, not with an oversized bezel, not by turning it round 90 degrees, but just increasing the proportions exactly in line with the ratios from the original design. Instead of being 27mm across, which at the time felt small, still feels small now, the 3738 increased to 31.5mm across. For that reason, it is my favourite case size. There's no doubt about it. It's still almost as thin as the original, absolutely elegant and so easily sliding under a shirt cuff, but it's a more legible size and becomes almost unisex in its appeal. This case size really began to work on all wrist sizes. Whether you like small watches or big watches, this is the Goldilocks size. The 3738 built on the foundations of the 240 caliber, so it's got a micro rotor and can be used as a daily wearer for that reason. You know, having an automatic watch makes daily use so much easier than having to manually wind it through the day. This is a watch that you can wear on your 9 to 5, come home, change your clothes, put it on your bedside, and then wake up in the morning and it's still got enough power reserve in it for you to start the day again. And you really can't say that of the earlier manual winds. As much as I love the caliber 215, I do think the 240Q automatic is the one that I like the most. This is a watch that is so versatile in so many ways, but still adheres to those key characteristics from the original. The 3738 was such a popular size that it was created for more than 4 decades. Here on the table we've got an earlier version, interestingly with an elliptical deployant. love that. But we've also got two examples of the 3738 from the 2010s. The case size proportions are identical, but Patek has started experimenting with different dial colors. This one in an exquisite brown, contrasting against a rose gold. It's so refreshing to see the golden ellipse in a metal type that's subtly different. Rose gold contrasts so well against the brown dial. I don't think it would be the same in yellow gold, frankly. I look at these three with the white gold and grey dial alongside it too, and I think that those three watches would make the perfect foundations for a Patek Ellipse collection. I'd love to think that I could collect all of these, but I think these three are the ones that I would seek out first. When you're sat here and you're faced with the chronology of the ellipse, I really feel like the 3738 was the high watermark. This was the point when Patek had realized that they got all of the ingredients just right. And it's for that reason that they started experimenting with different dial colors and materials. I can see so many different of these building up a collection. I'd love to think that they would have stone dials and enamel dials, and I'm sure they're out there. I know they are, but they're very hard to find. These are the ones that people tend to gravitate towards. These are the more popular ones, particularly, of course, blue, gold, and yellow. But the variety that comes with these different dial types just makes me as a collector happy. It's the best case size in all the different colorways that you could want for every outfit. There's one last thing that I want to say about the 3738 and the difference between these modern versions and the earlier 3738, and that is at the 6 o'clock position, no longer have we got that Sigma, Swiss Sigma emblem at the bottom, which indicated that Patek was part of the association of gold. And I think that's sad. I think the modern ones leaving it to just the Swiss stamp, I think you lose some of that romanticism of that time when everything was a celebration of gold. I do wish that those Sigma dials still existed in the current lineup, but I understand completely why they're not around anymore. I think it makes the collectability of the earlier pieces that much more important. When you find an original Sigma dial like these that don't have that patination that starts to penetrate the blue of the dial, it makes the art of the hunt that much more important. There are some dials that you see that have not been well looked after, that have really become organically different, that started to age in a way that's either your cup of tea or not. But when you find a dial that has been looked after, that still has those original Sigma icons down at the bottom of the dial, it's just a happy thing for me. That's what I like in collecting. All of the original hallmarks, the original shape, not polished to death, not rounded to a point where those golden ratios don't quite work. But enough gushing about the 3738. I've got a story to tell, so let's move on. In today's catalogue, the only ellipse that exists is the 5738. That is a 35mm case size. It's a big watch. It still has an automatic caliber in it based on the 240Q. But for me, moving away from that golden ratio, you lose some of that romanticism that comes from the original penned concept. And you still got 50 years or more of being able to hunt through all of the different ellipses that were created by Patek, all of these different designs, all of the different dial types, the oversize, the standard, the white metals, the yellow gold. That's what I love about the ellipse. Understanding something new about a line that I'm already madly in love with. I see bracelet types that I've never even known about. I see a turquoise stone dial in a 3589. It's just mind-blowing. Some of the watches that Patek have made over the years that all fall under this ellipse range, which is a great way to dovetail into the 3567. The 3567 is an ellipse, but no part of it conforms to the golden ratio. There's no dial that's oval shaped. The case is actually squared. It's probably more like a gondolo than it is an ellipse, but yet it still falls under the ellipse line. I know I've just been talking about how deviating from the golden ratio doesn't work for me, but this has got nothing to do with a golden ratio, but yet still it works. I love it. It's a manual wine caliber. It's actually not a 215 or a 300, it's a 175. Why? I don't know. But I do know that this watch is design-led. It wasn't built around whatever movements they had on the shelf. This was something that was created and handcrafted by someone with a very small hammer and a lot of time, and they worked their way through the bracelet, through the dial, to create something that's monolithic on your wrist, that feels so much more like jewellery than any of the watches that we've talked about so far. The hammered dials, particularly under a loop, are fascinating to see. It's very, very difficult to explain how it feels until you get close up with it, because there's no regular pattern to it at all. The dial is handmade, and so you've got this sort of disarray in it. You can't quite get your head around how there's no symmetry at all. It's almost like a rebellious rejection of the original concept of the ellipse. How on earth they decided to put this under the ellipse name, I don't know. Possibly because it's a thin dress watch, an elegant dress watch, but that's really as close as it gets to the 3548. There's no other synergies between them at all. It's a watch that shouldn't work, but my God, does it work. I adore it. And they made it in different metal types with different dials. In the past, we've seen blue with white gold. Here we've got all white gold. And we've also got a yellow gold with a blue dial. What a perfect contrast. And for whatever reason, they've put white hands on it. I don't know why. Probably for contrast and legibility. But still, there's just none of that synergy that came with the original concept. They've really thrown the design book out and they've just got a little bit creative. And maybe that's just because it's the 70s and that's what people did back then, but I don't know. I'm here for it. These are very rare things and they're very overlooked by collectors, and I think that's all about to change. So, we're still in the 1980s. And around the time of the 3567, Patek decided to go head-to-head with Piaget and make a watch that, for some reason, fell under the ellipse line, even though it's not a golden ratio and it's not round at all. But they decided to create the 3730T with an onyx stone dial. It's a very rare watch. There's something about onyx that feels like a black hole. It feels like light is absorbed to it, but not reflected from it. It's so deep and dark and interesting. It leaves the wearer to just focus on the shape of the bezel, because there's nothing really in the center of the watch. It feels like a picture frame with nothing in it. It's a fascinating watch. We happen to have the white gold brother to this in Subdial some time ago. It ended up going to a collector in the US. I wish I had it here side by side with this yellow gold model, because I didn't realize at the time how special it was. Just like the 3567, this watch really doesn't conform in any way to the golden ellipse concept, other than being a thin dress watch. There's no golden ratio, there's no blued gold dial. If you look at the profile of this watch, it feels like it wasn't even made by Patek Philippe. It feels more like a Piaget. but yet somehow it exists, and it exists part of that ellipse umbrella. And I really feel like it was created to go head to head with Piaget, to try to appeal to someone that wanted to be a part of that stone dial revolution back in the 70s and 80s, but they wanted to stick with the Patek family. That's why this watch was made, and that's why, frankly, they didn't sell too many of them. And now, as collectors, we're able to seek out these things, and they're that much more special as a result. We really don't know how many 3732s were created. There's speculation there's only a handful of them. I know that we've seen one, possibly two white gold examples in years of looking for them, and there's probably not many more yellow gold examples. But if you're able to find one, I implore you to try to get hands on with it and understand why it's such an oddball, but yet it works, and it feels like an ellipse but an outlier, and that's interesting and amazing. What a watch, and what a way to round off this incredible selection of watches. Some of my all-time favorites from Patek, let alone the Ellipse line. I mean, what a selection, and what a way to cap it off. It might just be me, but there's one thing about the Ellipse that really, really appeals to me. It's so silly, but the tang buckle is just this perfect ellipse shape. It's so silly, I know it is, but it completes that sort of unified thinking around the original concept. It looks perfect. It gives you that harmonious design from the watch itself all the way around to the other side of your wrists, and no matter where you're looking at your watch, you know that it's an ellipse. But it functions so well. It really is an unsung hero, and it makes me think about all of the other things that were produced as part of that elliptical lifestyle, that brand within a brand. I love how if you had one of these things, the salesperson might say, would you like a ring to go with that? And we've got one here. This is a yellow gold blue dial ring. They're very rare things, and you pick it up and that sense of luxury just flows and washes over you. It feels heavy, it feels luxurious, and it's created with the same care and attention as the watches themselves. These are really rare, and I get why. You can see the Patek hallmarks in the watch. You can see the Patek hallmarks within the ring itself. This one's had a very sheltered life actually, but it's got all of the shape and the details and the gravitas of everything else that comes in the Ellipse line. I love this thing. And why stop at rings? Well, you could even have a key ring. The funniest thing about this key ring actually is that you can send this thing off to Patek to be serviced. There's no moving parts in this thing at all. It's a chunk of gold with a blue dial and a keychain. But I love the idea that you can send this off to, well, if you're in the UK, Chalfont St Giles, and someone would bring this back to its original proportions and its original perfection. I really feel like this keyring is the perfect manifestation of the Ellipse lifestyle. It's so decadent, it's so heavy and unnecessarily luxurious, and it's the perfect way to round off a conversation about the Ellipse line and why it's so important to Patek and why it's so interesting to collectors like myself. It's been an absolute joy to sit down and be faced with some of my favorite time-telling pieces, some of my favorite pieces of art. I really hope you've enjoyed my love letter to the Patek Ellipse. It brings me so much joy to be surrounded by these watches, and I will continue to hunt for them, and I look forward to seeing you out there hunting for them too. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.